joining us for what is the 81st annual open meeting of the Committee for the Nonpartisan Nomination and Election of School Trustees, commonly referred to as the NPC. My name is Tim Reedy. I am the chair of this year's NPC. Our other officers this year include Vice Chairs Kathy Flanagan and Jim King. If you guys want to raise your hands. Treasurer Neve Hartnett Merluccio, and our Secretary Dale Fraze. We are fortunate to have three panelists with us tonight who will share their thoughts on the schools and answer questions. We first have Dr. Mary Jeffra, Vice President of the Board of Education, Board Member John Atkinson, and Dr. David Quattroni, Superintendent of Bronxville Schools. Excuse me. Before they speak, I'd like to give a brief overview of the NPC and our process. Excuse me. We're going to start, I'm going to get a glass of water. I'm going to start by the NPC members are going to come up and introduce themselves and introduce their district. Kathy, you want to start?
Sure.
You want to go there? Maybe he's here. We're going to ask everybody to come up to this microphone and also ask questions of this microphone if possible. Yeah.
Kathy Flanagan, District 20.
Neve Hartnett Merluccio, District 21.
Jim King, District 22.
Dale Fraze, District 22.
Jim Purdy, District 19.
Sarah Dodson, District 21. Courtney McCarthy, District 18. Julian Goddard, District 18.
Alana Sunier, District 18.
Charlotte Rizzo, District 21.
Andrew Harwood, District 17.
Winnie Devereaux, District 20.
Tom Brimble, District 22.
Tommy Neal, District 17.
And Michael Myers could not join us tonight. He is District 19, and Larry Bettino is District 16, and I am also from District 20. Before we begin, a brief introduction to the NPC. Our primary role is to identify, vet, and nominate the most qualified candidates to serve on the school board. The NPC is comprised of 21 members, some of whom you've met tonight, 3 from each of Bronxville's 7 voting districts. In order to fully represent the Bronxville community, the NPC asks residents to participate in the search process for committee members. Elections for the NPC will take place in May, shortly after the school board election, and we encourage anyone interested to contact us for more information. And I'll put out our website, it's bronxvillenpc.com. The NPC was created in 1936 when village Democrats and Republicans joined together to design a system for nominating school board nominees without regard to party affiliation. Their aim was to have a nominating process that focused on candidates' skills and qualifications rather than affiliations to parties and one-issue specific candidates. This open meeting was designed as a forum for the NPC and the community to learn more about the school and discuss the factors that the NPC may wish to consider during the search and selection of candidates for nomination. This school year, there are 2 open trustee positions and 2 board members are coming to the end of their first term. Incumbents who choose to run for a second term are subject to the same procedures and evaluative process as non-incumbents. Each year, the NPC undertakes an extensive search and review process to identify the best candidates for the Board of Education. This process takes about 6 months of thorough research and evaluation and culminates in the nomination of 1 candidate for each of the open board positions. In the fall, so starting now, we invite current and ex-trustees to give us their thoughts on issues, current challenges, and the future outlook of the schools. This research assists us in developing a better understanding of the key issues the board will face in the coming years. During this period, we ask the community to suggest candidates, and we contact potential applicants. We strive to attract the widest pool of potential trustee nominees. We publicize our search with notices in local media, by email, and through this open meeting, which will be recorded, as you see, and circulated in social media and also on local television. Individuals interested in taking part in the process must complete an application which is available again on the NPC website, bronxvillenpc.com. Applications this year are due March 4th, 2017. After the applications come in, the NPC members review them, check references, and interviews all the candidates. After this thorough review and extensive deliberations, the NPC will nominate one candidate for each of the 2 open seats. Following that, we will sponsor a meet and greet reception for the nominees, which is usually held in April. This year will take place on April 25th for the public to meet our school board candidates. On May 16th, the village elections will be held and citizens will cast their votes for board members along with approval of the school budget. More info on this process and all the details, again, is on our website. Now, right now, I'd like to hand the microphone over to my colleague, Jim King, who's going to introduce David Quattroni, our superintendent, and then Kathy will introduce our other 2 panelists. Jim?
Thanks, Tim. I guess this will be the last time David will be here for us, since he's retiring next year and leaving us. But just kind of the basics. David, he grew up in Connecticut, and then, as they say, the young man went west and got his first degree at Stanford in history, and then went to graduate school. He went to graduate school at Harvard and got a master's and got his doctorate in education, and became a teacher. And his first teaching job was teaching history in Newton, Massachusetts. And then from there, he had a number of jobs. He became a the principal in Groton, Mass. And then he became the superintendent at Greenwich Public Schools, and then went to Ohio, and he was the superintendent at the Indian Hills Public Schools. So David has taught a lot of teachers and students in Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, and Ohio, so there must be tens of thousands, I guess, of former students and teachers out there that have had the privilege of being taught by David. So we've been very fortunate to have him here. He's been here, I believe, since 2005, a little over a decade. And as you know, he's retiring at the end of the school year. So I'm sure I speak for all the current NPC members and passive seat members that we want to say thank you, David, for all the great work that you've done and for becoming a teacher in the first place. And we will miss you, but I'm sure we'll hear great things from you in the future. So anyway, our thanks to you.
I'd like to introduce Dr. Mary Giffra. Dr. Mary Giffra is currently Vice President of the Bronxville School Board. During her 2.5 years on the board, she was board liaison on the Staff Development Committee and witnessed firsthand the evolution of the Bronxville Promise. She served as chair of the Audit Committee and as a member of the Safety Committee. She was recently appointed chair of the newly formed Strategy Curriculum Committee. In her professional life, Dr. Giffra is a licensed therapist. She was the founding vice president of the United States Association for Body Psychotherapy and co-editor of the International Journal of Somatic Psychotherapy. She has served on the boards of Westchester Medical Center and Our Lady of Mercy Medical Center. She was also appointed to the governing board of Lawrence Hospital Center. She received her master's and PhD at New York University, where she served as a tenured associate professor. She also served as a full professor at the College of Mount St. Vincent, where she helped develop their undergraduate and graduate programs in nursing. Currently, Mary serves on the Dean's Council at New York University, Steinhardt, and has a private practice in individual, couple, and family psychotherapy. Her 4 children, 3 lawyers and 1 financier, are graduates of Bronxville School, as are her granddaughters, Gabriella and Alessandra. Mr. John Atkinson is currently in his 2nd year on the school board, where he serves on the Facilities Committee. John is the managing director of Fortress Investment Group, where he has worked for 13 years, and treasurer of the board of directors of Achievement First Brooklyn School, a charter school in New York City. He has also served as chair of that board. The Achievement First Network serves over 9,000 students in grades K through 12 in 29 schools. John is a graduate of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where he was a Moorhead Scholar. He received his JD from Yale Law School, While living in New Haven, he helped to found Armistead Academy, a charter school that later grew to include schools in New York and Rhode Island. Here in Bronxville, John has volunteered for many years with the Bronxville Youth Lacrosse Association. He and his wife, Amy, have 4 children in the Bronxville schools.
So if our panel wouldn't mind coming up to the microphones here, and we're going to ask each of them to speak for about 5 minutes about some of the issues they might want to surface regarding their time on the school board and some what issues they face currently. And then we're going to open up to questions. First to members of the public, and we also have some questions from the NPC. So I believe we're going to start with Superintendent Quadroni.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for your kind remarks at the opening of the meeting. We used to have our school board meetings here, and it doesn't appear to be on, but
I'll check. But keep going.
it's okay.
Yeah.
So in preparing for tonight and thinking about tonight, one question I had was, well, how do you, as an NPC, gauge your own success? How do you know whether you're doing a good job or not? And it occurs to me that you're going to have a good chance to see the results of your labor as the board members that you have selected come together to choose a new superintendent this coming year. And so that, seeing as I'm entitled at this point to go to the nostalgia phase of my career, I thought about 12 years ago when I interviewed for the job and what I was looking for. Because I think it's fair to say that it's not only the board that interviews the superintendent, the potential superintendent interviews the board and the community that they are about to join. And so the nuances of those relationships and whether or not a trusting relationship can be built is a critical concern for any candidate who wants to bring his or her family here and become an extension of the community. So the work that you have done going back many years has resulted in the board that we have now. And back then, there were issues that are similar. Concern about taxes, concern about construction, concern about the levels of achievement of students. And all those things may have changed in their flavor, their dimensions and magnitude, but are still there. So what was I looking for as I was in a dark room in the basement of before the floods, before the most recent floods, and what was I looking for? Well, I was looking for a board that wanted me to succeed. Somebody that was not operating from an assumption of a deficit or playing gotcha with me. I was looking for a group of people that that understood that for the community to succeed, we're all in it together. And it was important to me and very significant for me at that time to know that the board was willing to shoulder some of the burden of finances and construction woes and legalities back then that were the result of things that preceded them in 2001. Because the board in 2005 was reaping both the pluses and the minuses of work that had gone before them. So that historical perspective and building towards the future in an incremental fashion is part of what boards have to do. We all are the recipients and the beneficiaries of the work that has gone before. So I recall very vividly, because there was a multi-million-dollar lawsuit at that time about construction, and the board saying, we want you to be the education leader of this district, and to that end, we want to create the conditions of success, and we will shoulder the burden of managing some of those litigation issues. I suppose some people would prefer that I don't mention that, but to me, that's a part of the history and a strong part of the history. And another, so what concerns do you have about coming here? And I had been in larger districts. I said, well, I'm a little concerned that Bronxville might be too small. And the president of the board turned to me and said, well, do you want to be a manager or do you want to be an educator? And so that, I found that a persuasive moment in the interview process. And I would hope that the board that we have now would be able to come together and issue a similar united front, not only from the point of view of does an interview go well, but does the tenure go well? And I'm pleased and fortunate to have been successful enough to be here for 12 years And who wants to spend their time fighting with the board or working or having to look upward in the hierarchy rather than spending your time creating and developing the capacity of the young people and the teachers that surround us. And so when it works well, the board and the superintendent will embrace those issues, not only of finances and educational strategy, but also the capacity of the community to be vibrant and to be what is actually, and perhaps unfortunately, a rarity in our country today, which is the local community is the cornerstone of the republic. So that's where I hope that your group continues to focus its efforts, and I hope that the board that we have now will do the same thing.
Well, I'd like to begin by saying it's been really fun to be on the Board of Education. Work, but fun. I think David has been so visionary as an educator. It's been fun for me because I'm an educator, have always been, and he's just such a visionary, and it's great fun to see Bronxville. I truly think Bronxville will be the school of excellence in the country that many people would use as models. I mean, since David's been involved with the Bronxville Promise and gotten everyone aboard, it's just really impressive. So people from other districts are coming to find out how to do it. So I'm really, really impressed with the whole process and so on. And when I first was interviewed, I said that important thing for me was to have a strategic plan, to have a picture of where we're going, a vision, mission, strategic goals, and everything falls from that, or flows from that, I should say. So it's kind of fun that I'm now chairing the new strategy curriculum committee, and that feels very satisfying. I think one of the most important things in being a board member, as an academic, I always like to get a little data behind me. So this has been written by the American School Boards Journal. There's the American School Board Association, also the Westchester School Board Association, and they talk about the 7 signs of effective school board members, and I think it's really important to know that. The first one is going solo is a no-no. We're a board. You're not an individual, it's not a group of individuals, it's a board. And when you first come on board, it takes a good year to know what's going on. That was my experience, and that's what most of the literature says. So the most important thing is board members who can listen, and listen some more. So going solo is not the way to go. Next one is to respect the team, and that really flows from not going solo. That it's a team, it's a group. It's not an individual who does it, it's a group. Next is, and this is probably one of the most key components of all, understand the difference between board and staff. We're governance. We do not manage the school. We do not run the day-to-day operations of the school. This is all about me. This is from the American School Boards Association, but I totally support it. It says, it's your responsibility, as well as all your fellow board members, to ensure that the schools operate well, but it is not your responsibility to run them. That's the superintendent's job. Boards have great power, but it's power to establish goals, power to establish policies, and then the power to demand accountability for reaching those goals and really living out those policies. And we really need to be accountable for results. Okay, we have strategic goals. How are we going to assess them, implement them, and evaluate them on an ongoing basis and improve as we do that? Because really, our vision for Bronxville is excellence. Excellence in curriculum, excellence in staff, excellence in facilities, and excellence in budget management. So the next one is share and defend your views, but again, listen to the views of others. The next one is to keep learning, because it's really an ongoing I think if you do a good job, you have to keep learning. I really do. And the legal responsibilities is confidentiality. We can't say a word to anyone about what goes on in, you know what I mean, inside with staff, with any, you know, there's the open meetings law and everything is open, but we can't talk about other people. So that's legal. So that's kind of some of the official. And some of the common school board member blunders, and this is from mistakes that are easy to make. You're not impatient, you're impatient. It takes time. Change takes time. It's a whole process. It's a big institution that has to change. It takes time. You behave poorly. You're not respectful of other people. You want to be the Lone Ranger. We're not Lone Rangers, we're a group. You all know who the Lone Ranger is, and I'm not David myself. I know David does, but does everybody else? I got a little worried for a minute.
Go to X-Men.
Okay, X-Men. I know less about X-Men. And you can't see the forest for the trees. Our job is to macro-manage the system, to make sure that what needs to be in place is in place, that we have a curriculum that's really living out our vision, that we have ways of evaluating it, that we have ways of assessing the students, to see that what's supposed to happen is happening. It's not our job to get in there and muck around in it. We're not supposed to micromanage. That's David's job. So if I have any concerns, I go to David. I don't go to a principal, I go straight to David, because I'm accountable to go directly to him as a board member. And I think that's really important, not to micromanage about how David does what he does, or how somebody is, if it's not meeting our goals, then we need to hold David accountable, but we don't move in showing him how to do it. That's micromanaging and leads to a very dysfunctional system. I'm a real systems person, so I get worried about that. The superintendent focuses on, the board focuses on ends, vision, goals, policy. What's going to happen? Why is it happening? How well are we doing with it? And how much do we need to do what we need to do? The superintendent focuses on means, objectives, plans, actions, recommendations. How do we do it? When do we do it? Where do we do it? And who does it? So the board oversees the education of students, is responsible for school district operations, but does not directly run the district's day-to-day operations. I'm particularly excited about the Bronxville Promise because I think it's so 21st century. We really, in the 21st century, it's not like when I went to school with, as David called them, egg box crates, you know, with seats were in a row. With the internet, with the globalization, it's just a different world. And so we have to learn. It's not a matter of the expert teaching. It's learning together. It's the internet. It's a different world. It's technology. And students have to prepare for that world. And the Bronxville Promise is doing that. And whatever you learn today is outdated tomorrow anyway. So you just have to know how to learn and how to ask questions and how to solve them. And I'm talking too long. But we do hope to have, you know, with the Bronxville Promise, that every kid, K to 12, is a leader within their own abilities, an innovator, a critical thinker, an engaged citizen. They can take that with them, not only through college, but through the changing careers in life and become lifelong learners. So that's what I think a board needs. The main issues we're dealing with, the most important issue is hiring a superintendent. The most important task of a board's existence is the superintendent, because we can create all these, but superintendent carries out, so that's most important. Ensure that our strategic goals are being met, and that we use data to do that. You know, you just track using data. And maintain a budget within the tax caps, which is, you know, we can't just spend, have limitations with the tax cap, and create facilities that are not fun for us or for parents, but that really help students to, and help us to integrate the Bronxville Promise. So facilities have to, if you see the classrooms, and they're more fluid, and they're not like egg crates, etc. So I think it's an incredibly impressive district, and my congratulations to you, because you're a big part of it.
Kimosabe, but I didn't know that. I'll be Tonto. The first thing I'd like to say is thank you to the NPC for having me here, and thanks to the community for putting me on the school board. I'm personally very humbled to be on the school board, to work with the people that I work with and interact with the administration the way I do. I think it's a team of people that most parents in the school don't get a chance to interact with the administration as much as obviously their children's teachers. So it's a nice opportunity for me to have that opportunity and to work on the school board. Mary talked a lot about the functioning of a board, but I want to talk about, I guess, what it means to me. What do I think the role means to be on the school board? And I think for me, it's obviously very much a supervisory role, but it's an opportunity to try and foster and create an opportunity for success for our children to achieve the best they can possibly achieve in the classroom, in the theater, in the art room, on the fields, wherever they're going to be, from 8 until 4 o'clock in the day. And the three things we can do that focus on that, and Mary mentioned and touched on some of this, are to create a world-class team of people to provide those services and to teach our children and to support that infrastructure from a human resources standpoint. Now, obviously, it starts with the superintendent, and we are in right on the beginnings of a search that we're about to launch very publicly in the next probably 30 days, and that should conclude around March sometime, I think, if it's a successful search, which I think it will be. But starting at the top and then supporting the superintendent to make sure that he or she has the best possible team working for the school, and then working with the teachers. And the teachers are by far the single most important thing we can do in a school. And this year we have 18 teachers, 16 or 18 people up for tenure. That's a gigantic responsibility for the administration to vet people in a relatively short period of time, as we've added a year to the duration there, but it's a 3 or 4 year period to vet whether or not you're going to give somebody basically a lifetime job teaching your students. And we have a huge number of people coming through, but it's just indicative of the responsibility that we have to make sure that there's a very high bar and that there's a pretty high standard for what we're looking for in Bronxville, who are spending time with our kids every day. The second thing is to create a physical environment for their success. And we have a beautiful school building, which we've invested millions and millions of dollars in different parts over the last 10 years. But that's an ongoing thing. It's a dynamic environment, and the needs change over time. And the way we deliver instruction or education to our students and our kids changes over time, as evidenced by the generous gifts from the foundation that have created all these new learning spaces. And I think they've been a huge success, with particularly the high school kids. But as we roll out further, you'll see it more in the middle school and potentially down in the elementary school. But not just the space, but the way we teach kids, the project-based learning that's become a little bit more emphasized in the last few years. We need to think about, do we have the right facility to do what we want to do with regard to how we deliver the product, which is an education. And the last thing Mary touched upon is obviously doing it all within a tax cap environment and being fiscally responsible for ourselves as taxpayers, to make sure that it's not irresponsible spending of dollars, but it's actually very smart and very fiscally responsible. So those are the three things that I think as a board member and as a board collectively, I think we should be focused on. How do we interact with the team to make sure that all happens? I think we have to hold the team to a very high standard. And so to me, the interaction that I try and have is great expectations for our administration and our teachers, because we're asking them to have great expectations for our kids. And I think generally people rise to high expectations, and so our job is to push them a little bit in every aspect of what they're trying to do, and try and encourage them to keep thinking of new ways to do things and try and do it better, and keep pushing. You can't be complacent about Bronxville's a great school. People will come here, they'll pay the high taxes, and we'll deliver a a product that is good enough. It can't be that. So I think, as I think about for the NPC, as you go out and try and either recruit and or vet people who will be on the board, think about those things and think about obviously all the characteristics that Mary described in terms of what kind of board member, but also somebody who cares, somebody who's interested, who's motivated to think about new things. Adele Murray, I think, is stepping off, or may not be running again, but she's a great example of somebody who comes to meetings with ideas, and she doesn't just pursue it in the boardroom environment, but she pursues it with the foundation, with the PTA. She pursues it with the administrative staff, and somebody who's passionate about the topics that we're talking about, because I don't think David wants and the team wants just overseers. They want people, partners, to have them be successful, and as a result have the school be successful. So that's my view on kind of what the area should be, and obviously the appropriate role should be Mary talked about, but the kinds of people you should be looking for, I think, are the kinds of people who I would think it would be fairly obvious once you meet them that this is core to their being in terms of how they approach their daily lives and how they think about what matters to them. So for that, this question.
Run this back and forth. So we're going to invite people to come up here and ask questions of our panel. Obviously, the public is invited, but also we have members of the NPC. Maybe I'll just hold this, and whoever wants to start, I'll hand it off.
Hi, my question is, obviously, our biggest challenge this year coming is finding a new superintendent. Beyond that, what do you feel for upcoming, future board members? What is the biggest challenge that they will be facing with the school?
I have a couple thoughts on that. I think I don't think of it as challenges as much as opportunities. We spent 2 hours yesterday and a couple hours last week talking about the facilities long-term plan, and we have an opportunity in 3 or 4 years where the debt from the C wing is paid off, and so we have financial capacity to do something different, something new, and so. To me, that's a challenge to try and prioritize what do you want to do, if anything, with that financial opportunity. But a huge opportunity to try and find something that will add tremendous value to the physical plan and to what I described as one of the kind of the core 3 legs of the stool of what you're doing on the facility side. So that's one answer to the question of a challenge. It is a challenge. It's also an opportunity. In my view.
It doesn't feel like a challenge to me unless you mean challenge in an exciting, positive way. It feels like, as you said, John, a real opportunity. I think that Bronxville School, with David's leadership as an educator, is just really very far ahead of most of the other schools in Westchester and abroad. I did an educational policy fellowship at Columbia for a year, and there were board members, superintendents, etc. And I talked about the Bronxville Promise, and they were, to a person, extremely impressed. So we have an incredible structure in place. David has created the environment where teachers are learning K through 12. It's new to them too. And so they have to teach students something that may be a little different from how they taught previously, how they were taught to teach. So everyone is learning, but there's a structure in place for people to learn in a supportive way and to help teachers who, maybe it's a little more difficult. Change isn't easy for everyone. So the structure is in place. The students are, much more on board. Students and change are just synonymous. But the facilities and how the facilities that we have are really geared to a different way of educating students. So over the next 20 years, we won't be here for all of that, but the facilities have to come along with what how we're trying to educate is much less the teacher teaching the students, and it's more the teacher creating an environment and guiding the students, and with the internet and learning from each other, there are basic, traditional knowledges that we all have to have, and that will never change. But how do you add to that tradition with this new way of approaching? So I think a person has to be open to learn and to see and to, again, listen, and learn to see what we're doing and to keep evaluating. What is the data showing us? Are we doing what we say we're doing? Why aren't we? What can we do differently? You certainly don't start at perfect, and hopefully never will, because you're growing and improving and changing all the time. So a person who's open to do that, I think that's what the most is, to maintain what we've done so far and not lose that. What do you feel, Dave?
I'm not sure everybody needs to answer every question, but just the only other things that come to my mind are, one, continuing challenges of state financing and the tax cap, which may be unsustainable because of other things, other pressures that we face. I think if we switch that question, what's most important to keep and sustain? Clearly, one unique thing about our community is the close partnership between the parents, the residents, and the school, and you can't take that for granted. Sometimes you wish it would go away, in fact, but it's important to nurture and make sure that is serving the larger purposes of the district.
Thank you. Somebody else? If you want to introduce yourself when you come up, that'd be great.
Sure, thank you. I'm Bo Lescott. I've got 4 kids, 3 of which are in the school right now. My question is, some of the physical plant stuff is more visible to the community, the auditorium and the fields and so forth. Can you talk a bit about priorities for reinvesting in the curriculum and any areas you see as soft spots that could be improved from here?
Anybody want to field this one?
Well, one big thing that's changed in the last couple of years is the addition of a director of curriculum. So Dave's done a couple things prior to my serving on the board, was the addition of Mara, Dr. Ketke, and then Jennifer Forsberg for the director of technology. So I think those were two areas that certainly benefited from the addition of those resources. I think from a curricular standpoint, two categories that I think are important to continue to focus on. One is writing and general English competency, and that's an area that Dr. Ketke has very much been focused on really since day one with regard to the Columbia Teachers Program. But I think it can't be just that. It has to be sort of a holistic approach to writing. We talked at the other long-term planning meeting about co-curriculars, and I encouraged them to think about additional writing programs, including a newspaper and including literary magazine type things, and there's some of that. And in fact, the middle school newspaper has just been restarted. So the day they informed me that I'd done it, and then my son informed me he signed up to do it that day. So, but you can see how clued in that is going on. But English in general, English competency, and then I think the other thing is trying to keep up with, I'll call it STEM, but science and technology and math and how they're interrelated, and what does it mean to actually teach math. And I've thought to myself, there are some schools that teach BC calculus as a junior, and there's a track that gets you there, and you do linear algebra as a senior. Bronxville doesn't do that. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I've come to the conclusion that it's probably okay, because if you're going to be a superstar math person, you can go to college and take as much linear algebra and whatever else goes on after that in college. But rather than perhaps dedicating the human resources and the time to having that kind of track, we can do other things in math and science. And I think computer science is an area that we've been trying to augment, and I think can continue to be augmented. Things like robotics and just the world we're living in is changing so fast, and I think the world that we're trying to train or teach our children to be able to be successful adults in just forces us to try and push that area of the curriculum in a way that we don't really know where it's ultimately going, but we have to try and continue to try and add to it there.
I just want to add, and this is one of the issues even with the new superintendent that we have, is to really bring the changes that we're trying to make and our vision through the community to parents. So it's kind of a gradual process, starting with the teachers and the students, and so that what we're doing in school will happen at home, and we're all part of the same team, so that it's a really total effort that you're all, the entire community and parents can really work with the students in trying to do what it is they're trying to accomplish. And as John said, the project-based learning, the Columbia writing program, it's extraordinary. The dialectics program that they have. There's just so many impressive, and the STEM is the Bronx River research. Tomorrow morning I have a meeting at 8:15, students presenting research on the Bronx River, K through 12. It's exciting. I've seen graduate students and they're really learning very early, not only how to achieve in high school, but how to achieve in college and beyond.
I'm not sure I remember the question. I think we've spent quite a bit of time in a 100-year-old building talking about how space can support the kind of learning we want. I think another variable is time, and one of the issues we're trying to grapple with is if we want more in-depth inquiry, more long-term projects, more connections with community resources than was the case when I was growing up and going to school. Do we have the setup for that? Can we fit everything we want to do inside an 8 to 3 school day? No, we can't. But there are financial limits and cultural limits to what we can do. But those are real questions that we have to confront. We also, the way we organize students in groups of 20 may not be the only way we should be grouping students. Maybe we should have more of a collegiate model. We have large group, small group, individual tutorial. How do we set that up? And some of what we are doing to have a more personalized learning environment is directed to structures that can make that happen. Those are not, it's easy for me to say, those are rhetorical points, but actually making it work on the ground is very, very difficult. The way we organize teachers in the same way. We do have teaching teams that, especially in K through 8 by grade level, but that's not the only way you can organize the way we bring resources to bear on learning problems. And we should probably need more flexible groupings that way too. Those are all ideas that are not new with me. They've been around for a while. The fact that they aren't more widespread is due to some realities that have to be confronted in terms of culture, learning environments, funding. But those are the challenges that we have coming up.
If folks want to address their question to a particular analyst, please do. Don?
John Bringle again, NPC. It's my second year, District 22. And some of the things that we discussed last year as a group in trying to find replacement board members were in that same position this year. And for those board members who are leaving, I'm just curious for us in the community, what you think in terms of their areas of expertise, their qualifications, their background. One of our discussion items was, are those important or not to have somebody who is an expert in finance or an expert in construction facilities? With the departing board members, how do you feel in terms of replacing their areas of expertise? How important is that? Should we, as a NPC, be looking for those particular areas of expertise?
I have one quick answer to that.
I don't think it matters a lot. I think I've heard a number of times the best board member we've had is a dentist. And it would be hard to go out and find a replacement dentist for that board member. Jim Hudson. So I think he served like 7 years or 8 years because he had to hold over. But I don't think it's important to find, if you have a lawyer leaving, find a lawyer, or if you have a construction person leaving, find a construction person. If you have a finance person, replace it with a finance person. I think it's much more important to find the characteristics of somebody who cares about what they're doing and is motivated to do a good job.
I agree with John. I think the most important thing is that a person understands what a board is and how a board functions, and how you don't just come in and take over, and it's just not how it works. So in my mind, board experience is a big plus, big plus. That if there's anything that I would go for, it's board experience. And next to that is just being able to work with other people and learn and listen and know that you may really not know what's going on until you're in there and heard the whole story. So it's just being able to, and being with strategic thinkers and can see the big picture rather than zeroing in on micromanaging nuts and bolts would be my big push.
I also concur and would add sense of humor.
Yes.
All right.
Hi, Andrew Harwood. I have a child who's graduated from Bronxville, and I have two more in the 7th and 11th grade. First of all, David and Mary and John, thank you for all your time. David, you've been here a long time. Appreciate it immensely. And Mary and John, to my question, you guys spent a lot of time working for us, the community, to make the school better. What would be one thing that you would suggest that we say to prospective board members to get them to sign on for the task that you guys have all taken?
It's one of the Bronxville promises to help make the world a better place. Help the next generation, because that's our future.
At a more practical level, plan for at least two times a month, at least, if not 3 times a month, to be available at the school, whether that's morning or evening, because it's a commitment, and so somebody just to be upfront with people to say, look, it's a commitment that can be managed, but it's a commitment, and if you're not available for it, then you might as well not do it.
Bob Devereaux, 2 students in the school so far. How do you explain the dynamic between the different organizations that are influencing the school? The PTA, the Bronxville Foundation, and the board?
The PTA tends to be more present-oriented about the experiences that their children are having now in school. They meet once a month during the day. They have grade-level chairs. They meet regularly with the principal and are talking about such things as the quality of field trips that go on, organizing special events, and are always there to lend a hand. And for just as a recent example, the PTA organized an event in which the village officials, police, mayor, public works came and met elementary children in front of the school, and the police chief said, we had more smiles on our faces than they did. So that kind of connection with the community is an important ingredient of the quality of learning environment. The foundation I would characterize, and other people may have their own point of view, which is equally valid, is one step beyond that and tends to be less parent-driven and more community-driven in terms of how can we help the school in its role in the community. So, for example, the auditorium project had $3.5 million that was raised by the foundation. The PTA also raised money, but that was showed their commitment to making qualities of the school district more than adequate making them a superior quality, and their role in making that happen, supporting venture capital, has been instrumental in our moving forward, and they have helped our thinking get more strategic and better as a result of technology is another investment that they have made. All of those things contribute to a kind of vibrant relationship that is active and ongoing rather than passive. And I think we have benefited tremendously from that. It's also, no question, this is a steep learning curve for, if you ask any teacher who comes to us from another district, we tend to hire people who have been experienced somewhere because the community has such high expectations. That is, but I find that overall, the parent group and the foundation group are sensitive to that level of high expectations and trying to make it work in a constructive way.
Just quickly, we owe the foundation and the PTA a huge debt of gratitude all the time for everything they do. So every time the names come up, I have to say thank you, because just over the years, both of the organizations have been so generous with both financial resources and human resources to help the school be a great place.
Second that one.
Maybe another question or two, and then we're going to wrap it up and go to our reception. Anybody else? All right. Thank you.
Round down.
Yeah, you can go down this way.
Don't block my close.
Never. Greg Gilliam, I have 3 children in the school. You mentioned it earlier, I think each of you touched on it. I'm just curious about your respective roles with respect to the school being a neighbor in the community. Obviously, the Bronxville School plays a big factor in the Bronxville community, so how do you manage, how do you see the role of the school as being a part of the community and not just a school, I guess, for lack of a better word?
Well, the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was just the environment. You know, it's 1 smile square village, and the school is a piece of that. And I think we need to be sensitive to the interaction, our interaction with the community and the community's interaction with us. So I think that was a really important point to raise. And I totally think it's an important element, you know, not just to decide what we want, but how does it impact on the community and so on. So I couldn't agree with you more. That's on a physical level. And certainly on an interpersonal level, one of our goals, strategic, is communication, and to have much more communication with parents, but also with the larger community. You know, we kind of talked about having events for the larger community to come in, to understand, to hear what's going on, and also to tap into the resources of this community for the betterment of the school. I mean, there are such rich resources in Bronxville that could benefit our students. And so really tapping into that is all part of, you know, because it's really total community, and it's a dynamic community, and that's why the school is as good as it is.
When I first came here, one of the phrases that came to mind is "geography is destiny." The front lawn of the school really serves as the village green of the community, and we have several events every year that support that, and it's rare and it's precious and it's touching every time it happens. I think the school historically has been very sensitive to its neighbors. It hasn't always been free of conflict. But if you recall, and people again will say, why did you bring that up? When we talked about lights, and that's something, we are very landlocked, we are land-starved, given the amount of programs we have. We'd love to, when I worked in Ohio, we could plow down a cornfield and through the field. We don't have that luxury here, so that requires us to be good neighbors and it was just very clear after painful work, saying this is something we really need, but it also had such impact on the character of the community that it was not, it did not meet all the criteria that we needed to do to go forward. So that kind of give and take and that collaborative inquiry
sometimes painful, but it's part of doing business when you were a public entity, and it's even more amplified and intense when you're in our particular environment, so small.
Great. Any last questions? We are going to have a reception afterwards, so you'll have a chance to chat with some of our panelists. We want to say thank you very much to everyone. I have a few closing remarks. Thank you again to Mary, to John, and to David for being here this evening. A special thanks to David for all his years of service to the Bronxville community, as Jim said earlier. The NPC has a modest budget that covers our operating costs. It is funded by donations from the community. We welcome your donations. Our treasurer, Neve, as I mentioned before, is here to answer any questions you may have related to our budget and to provide information about how to give, which can be accomplished again through our website, bronxvillenpc.com. The NPC has now identified qualified school board members for over 80 years who have demonstrated a commitment to maintaining a high level of excellence in our schools. To do our job most effectively, we need community involvement for both our trustee and NPC member recruitment searches. If you're interested in any way in either becoming a trustee or learning more about how the NPC works, please speak to an NPC representative. We actually have posted all of our phone numbers and emails on that website, so feel free to contact us at any time. We want to say thank you, good night, and we will continue the conversation in the next room. Thank you again for our time.